So yeah, this came out just this morning. This does surprise me quite a bit because I would have expected Iran to basically just roll over and take the U.S. bombings on their nuclear sites and just sort of accept it. And that they know they don't want to have to actually fight the U.S. directly. Like, they can mess with Israel, and they know the U.S. doesn't have that much of a penchant to get really into a war on Israel's side. And to that extent, they don't want to mess with the U.S. directly because they don't want to awaken the sleeping giant. Well, it appears that they continue their string of really poor decisions and have begun hitting U.S. bases in Qatar and Iraq. Iran launched missile attacks Monday on U.S. military bases in Qatar and Iraq, retaliating for the American bombing of its nuclear sites and escalating tensions in the volatile region. Qatar condemned the attack on Al Udeid Air Base. Qatar condemned the attack on Al Udeid Air Base attack, but said it successfully intercepted the missiles and no casualties were reported. It said its airspace was now safe. Okay, so Qatar... Yeah, because Qatar is, I guess, a soft ally of ours, so they shot down... Okay, so that's interesting. They protected the base for us. Iran said that the attack in Qatar matched the number of bombs dropped by the United States on its nuclear sites this weekend, signaling its likely desire to de-escalate. Yeah, okay, so if they're saying, hey guys, we dropped the exact number of bombs you did, not a single one more, to me that shows that this was mostly performative, and that they know they don't want a war with the U.S. Iran also said it targeted the base because it was outside of populated areas. It would not now, this is not me giving Iran any credence or any credit here, but it would not blow my mind if, like, the analysis on the Iranians' part is basically that this attack happened from the U.S. We have to respond in some kind of way. It can be entirely symbolic and not serious. And I think that's the route they've gone. They've basically gone for a pseudo-symbolic gesture to their people, saying, hey, we're not going to let America do this. We're going to fight back, yada, yada, yada. And so they probably fired missiles at a base that they had a pretty good idea wasn't going to get, like, I wouldn't surprise me if they specifically chose this target and specifically chose this number of missiles because they knew that there was a low chance of it actually causing any serious damage, killing personnel, or doing anything that would really piss off the U.S. and cause them to get into it more. And so this, to me, screams like this is more of a performative act. The Ain al-Assad base housing U.S. troops in western Iraq was also targeted. It wasn't immediately clear if there was damage to the Iraq base or any injuries. The retaliation came a day after the U.S. launched a surprise attack Sunday morning on 3 of Iran's nuclear sites. Earlier in the day, Israel expanded its war against Iran to include targets associated with the country's struggling theocracy, striking the gate of a Tehran prison notorious for holding political activists and hitting the headquarters of a military force that suppressed recent protests. As plumes of thick smoke rose over Tehran, Israel was attacked with yet another barrage of Iranian missiles and drones. The persistent fire has become a reality for civilians in both countries since Israel started the war to target Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. On the 11th day of the conflict, Israel said it attacked regime targets and government repression bodies in the heart of Tehran, but Israeli officials insisted they did not seek the overthrow of Iran's government, their arch-enemy since the country's 1979 Islamic Revolution. Okay, so this to me seems like they do want regime change, right? I don't think that they'd be going after... another article we read talked about them going after... a specific police force that Iran uses to go after protests and quell dissent and whatnot. This combined with them saying that they've bombed a prison, specifically a prison that's used to target political dissidents and whatnot, shows to me that, like, they really are going for regime change, but they're kind of trying to do it in the sneaky internal way. They're trying to, like, facilitate it internally rather than like bring in 20,000 troops and then like do it the old school classic way. I think they're trying to like make it happen from within. They're trying to plant the seeds there and water it so that the revolution and the overthrowing the regime change happens from within and so that they can kind of have their hands mostly clean of it. The Israeli military warned Iranians that it would continue to attack military sites around Tehran over the coming days, as its focus has shifted to symbolic targets as well. The military issued the warning on the social media platform X, though Iranians are struggling to access the outside world as an internet shutdown has crippled the country. Yeah, I wonder if that's probably partly why we've seen so few videos of the result of the bombing that's been happening in Tehran and the rest of Iran, is because not only are outside international news agencies, as far as I'm aware, not allowed to come in and report. If they have a full internet blackout, how are people at all expected to get videos of the bombing and whatnot out? So it's really hard for us to know what's going on there. It's very easy for us to know what's going on in Israel because they don't have an internet blackout. Everybody has a phone. You know, it's different. If the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be regime change? He asked on his Truth Social website. According to an Israeli official familiar with the government's strategy, Israel is targeting these sites to put pressure on the Iranian administration, but is not actively seeking to topple it. In Vienna, the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog said he expected there to be heavy damage at the Fordow facility following Sunday's U.S. airstrike there with sophisticated bunker buster bombs. Iran said the U.S. had crossed a very big red line with its risky gambit to strike the three sites with missiles and 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. Several Iranian officials, including Atomic Energy Organization of Iran spokesman Behrouz Kamalavandi, have claimed Iran removed nuclear material from targeted sites ahead of time. That would not surprise me. It would not blow my mind if, if they didn't catch wind of this attack before it happened, at least catch wind of it when the bombers are in the air and approaching Iran. They probably catch wind of it and is like, all right, guys, let's move this stuff. I'm sure they have contingency plans for all of this, especially in these recent couple weeks where Israel and Iran have been popping off. Iran described its Monday attack on Israel as a new wave of its Operation True Promise 3, saying it was targeted. I feel like it's like the third sequel of it's like a movie franchise, right? The Operation True Promise was the hit. It was the first one. It was a huge hit, and then they had Operation True Promise 2, which was in theaters and it didn't do so well. And then they had a straight to direct to DVD Operation True Promise 3. You know, even promiseier. Promises were broken. I guess the promise wasn't Operation True Promise 3. I guess the promise wasn't true. Saying it was targeting the Israeli cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv, according to Iranian state television. In Israel, at least 24 people have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded in the war. Israeli strikes on Iran have killed at least 950 people and wounded 3,400 others, according to the Washington-based group Human Rights Activists. The group, which has provided detailed casualty figures from Iranian unrest, such as the protests surrounding the death of Masha Amini in 2022, said of those killed, it identified 380 civilians and 253 security force personnel. Okay, so a 50% civilian death rate and 50% military, that's actually not terrible. That's not terrible. It's not good, but it is, compared to many other recent conflicts in the area, that seems to be a better percentage than most, or maybe any of them. Calls for de-escalation. The U.S. described its attack on the Fordow and Natanz enrichment facilities, as well as the Isfahan nuclear site, as a one-off to take out Iran's nuclear program, but Trump has warned of additional strikes if Tehran retaliates. Mousavi described the American attacks as violating Iran's sovereignty and being tantamount to invading the country, the state-run IRNA news agency reported. But isn't Iran shooting missiles at Israel violating their sovereignty as well? And I would argue that, or just by virtue of being in a theocracy and Sharia law, that they're violating the sovereignty and the human rights of their own people. Putin called the Israeli and American attacks on Iran an absolutely unprovoked aggression. Absolutely unprovoked aggression. That is just like an absolute fabrication. It's so devoid from reality. Iran has been talking shit to Israel for decades. They've been talking about wiping both the U.S. and Israel off the face of the earth. They've been talking about making nuclear weapons. They've been talking about using those nuclear weapons. To say this is absolutely unprovoked, they shot missiles at Tel Aviv like 2 months ago. Like, to say this is absolutely unprovoked is insanity. Iran, which insists its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only, previously agreed to limit its uranium enrichment and allow international inspectors to access its nuclear sites under a 2015 deal with the US, France, China, Russia, Britain, and Germany in exchange for sanctions relief. The Iran nuclear deal. But after Trump pulled the U.S. unilaterally out of the deal, during his first term, Iran began enriching uranium up to 60%, a short technical step away from weapons-grade levels of 90% and restricting access to its nuclear facilities. We know for a fact, based in 2023, the International Atomic Energy Agency released a report that said we have proof, undeniable proof, that Iran is enriching uranium at least to 84%. I think they said 83.9% is what we detected in the facilities out in Tehran. We detected these particles in the air. And so they know for a fact that Iran is, at least since 2023, we've known that Iran is enriching uranium up to a weapons grade amount. And so we've known for quite a while that they've been... we know that probably since it wouldn't surprise me if since the closing of the Iranian nuclear deal, that is when they were like, all right, guys, guess we're making a weapon. This just seems like another really poor decision alongside Iran's choice to do the initial strike on Israel on June 13th or June 14th. It just seems like an extremely short-sighted decision that, like, it shows to me that they don't understand the game they're playing, right? Iran for a while has been playing this larger, I'm going to call it a meta game, in which they're playing this poke the bear game, right? They're poking the bear, which is Israel, right, in various different ways, by funding the Houthis in the north, by shooting a few missiles at them here or there, by, talking shit. There's all sorts of ways that Iran has been poking the bear, all right? And they need to understand, though, they don't understand the metagame of poking the bear, right? If the metagame is poking the bear, then you need to understand, like, well, if you poke a little too hard or a little too much, sometimes the bear is going to swipe at you and he's going to scratch you, and you just kind of have to, like, wait for the scratch to heal to go back to poking the bear, right? That's the metagame. If you're going to poke the bear, you kind of have to accept the fact that you're going to get scratched sometimes, and that you got to deal with that scratch and take it on the chin, and then can go right back to your metagame of poking the bear. Well, it seems to me like I thought they understood the metagame because they were playing that game for years. But it seems to me like the strike on Israel shows that they don't understand the metagame at all, because Israel came in, and the scratch that I'm referring to, right? They've been poking Israel for decades and decades, years and years, and then Israel comes in and scratched them. They say, okay, we're going to strike their nuclear facilities and a couple of your military sites and whatnot. Not your civilians. We're going to be very targeted and go after your nuclear facilities. We're not going to do regime change. We're going to go exclusively after your nuclear facilities, okay? Israel does this, and Iran what they should have done is understand the metagame that they've been playing of poking the bear and say, look, guys, like, yeah, this sucks, but this is part of the game. We got scratched. We have to lick our wounds for a little bit and then go back to poking the bear. We just kind of have to take it. But they didn't do that. They've been poking the bear scratches, and then they punched the bear. Well, when you punch the bear's going to get pretty mad, and the bear is not going to just try and scratch you. Now they're going to try and hurt you. And so it just seems like to me like they didn't understand the metagame that they were playing, poking the bear, trying to tip, play footsie with Israel. They just were, it seems to me like they didn't understand the metagame that they were playing, and they went way too far and give Israel full justification to come in and fuck them up. And I feel like that's exactly what this choice to hit American air bases is. They're giving the U.S. pretty good justification to come in and do whatever they want. And so it just seems extremely stupid, extremely short-sighted, and on top of it all, most importantly, to me it shows that they do not, and either did not or do not currently understand the larger metagame that they were playing with Israel when they were poking the bear. I thought they understood the game, but clearly they didn't. Like, it almost seems suicidal to me. Like, if I wanted to create a way to collapse the Iranian government from within, this would be how I would. This is one of the ways I would try and do it, and create some level of plausible deniability while doing it. This is probably one of the ways that it would happen.